Hello and welcome to Right Sports Talk. My name is Zach, and the NFL season has officially come and gone, but the UFL season is right around the corner as that kicks off the end of next month. But with players reporting to training camp for the UFL starting next week, I just wanted to go over some of my notable players for each UFL team going into this 2026 season. The UFL has been around for now 3 years. For those of you who are new or just discovering the UFL, it started up in 2024 when the USFL and the XFL merged. Those were the two spring league football leagues. They merged to form the United Football League. This is that third year of existence for the UFL. We're getting to the point now where we have, I think, a good, healthy mix of players that have some NFL experience on these UFL rosters and some guys that have really been making a name for themselves in spring football in the UFL. Some of the guys I'm going to talk about today are guys kind of like that, where there's a good amount of guys that have a lot of, or at least a couple seasons of UFL experience and have kind of built themselves as players in the UFL. But let's get into this. I'm going to start off with the Birmingham Stallions. First player I'm going to talk about is actually their kicker, Rodrigo Blankenship. He's somebody that has NFL experience as a kicker, former Indianapolis Colt for a few years. Last season was on the St. Louis Battlehawks in the UFL. He had a very good season. He only missed one kick. All of the regular season was 21 of 22 on his field goals. He's a guy that is a very talented kicker, and he's continuing to try to work his way back to try and earn an NFL tryout, an NFL contract. He played very tremendously last season. He's a guy that has a bunch of followers on social media where he films himself every week during the NFL season, doing some of the hardest kicks of each week of the season. Somebody that documented his experience last season in the UFL, and I look forward to seeing what he can do this season, as I believe he is a very talented kicker and hopefully can get another shot at the NFL. But as a UFL fan, I am happy to see him back and still getting opportunities to play. Next, I'm going to talk about Birmingham's quarterback, Matt Corral. Matt Corral is a guy that, again, some NFL experience with being drafted a few years ago, I believe in 2022, by the Carolina Panthers, but missing all of his rookie season due to an injury. Wound up in Birmingham in 2024. He's been there for 2 years, but he's another guy, or he's a guy that has injuries have kind of hampered him, and he hasn't been able to stay a full-time starter in Birmingham or in the UFL. This season, it doesn't really look as a whole lot of competition around him right now for that starting quarterback job. So hopefully he can come in and stay healthy, as he's a very talented quarterback, and in those playing time that he has gotten, he's shown flashes of the talent that he has. So I'm just intrigued to see what he can do going into this season. Next up, linebacker Tay Crowder, again, guy with NFL experience, was the last player drafted in the 2020 draft. He's a tremendous story of a guy that really had to work to even make it to the NFL. Stuck around in the NFL for a few years with the Giants. Actually started it a little bit for them, played pretty well. Wound up out of the NFL. Last season was on the Birmingham Stallions, had a very good season, I believe played in all of their games. So just a guy that has NFL experience, is now going into his second season on the Birmingham Stallions. Very talented linebacker, and I'm very excited to see what he can do going into this year. The next two players I'm going to talk about are linebacker Kava Tenzino and safety Jojo Tillery. I'm kind of going to lump those two kind of together, as they're very similar in the type of player that they are, as they've been with Birmingham for a few years. Actually, Tillery has been there since 2022 when they were still part of the USFL, and he's just kind of been a leader of their defense. And Tenzino has been there for a few years. Has been there for a few years now. Has been a part of their championship roster back in 2023, I believe, and 2024 in the UFL. They're both guys that are leaders on this defense. They're guys that have a whole lot of experience in spring football. They're both very talented, and I look forward to seeing how what they can do with this defense on a team that a bunch of the UFL got guys at the end of the year get dropped from their contracts, and then teams can only keep a certain number of players from the previous season. So I'm interested to see how this experience of these two defenders helps with this really new crop of players coming on to this team. Moving on, I want to talk about running back Anthony McFarland. Anthony McFarland is a guy that is a very talented running back. He previously of the San Antonio Brahmas for the past 2 seasons in the UFL. In 2024, he had 676 total yards, and this past season he had 584 total yards. He's a very talented running back, which is part of a very talented offense in this Birmingham Stallions team. Another guy that there's a theme of UFL running backs, especially coming into this year, of guys that have kind of split carries in the past and now have kind of looks like they have a chance to be like workhorses or number one or starting running backs for their team. Anthony McFarland is the first one of those guys that I'm going to talk about, and I'm and intrigued to see what he can do as a starter without having to split carries with other running backs, or maybe without having to split as many carries with other running backs. Next thing I'm going to talk about is wide receiver John Ross. If that name sounds familiar, that is because it is the John Ross that is a former top 10 pick for the Cincinnati Bengals back in 2017. The guy that used to hold the NFL Combine record for the 40-yard dash for the fastest time at the Combine. He's going to be in training camp for the Birmingham Stallions. He's signed to a contract with them recently. He's a player that has a whole lot of talent, a whole lot of speed, but hasn't really been able to stay healthy and been able to use that. But if he is able to stay healthy, I think that this receiving core in Birmingham could be very dangerous, especially with the next two guys that I'm going to talk about, and that's Deon Cain and Dawood Davis. Deon Cain is a very talented wide receiver. Last season had over 1,000 total yards. He's used both as a receiver, obviously, and he's a very talented kick returner. He was actually second in the UFL last season in receiving touchdowns. If you get the ball in his hands, he knows how to make plays. And then Dawood Davis, unfortunately, he only played in 4 games last season. He is somebody that was a former Memphis Showboat. In 2024, he actually played in all 10 regular season games where he had 446 receiving yards. He had 5 receiving touchdowns and was on the all UFL teams. He's another guy he's very talented as long as he can stay healthy. He's somebody that got tryouts with NFL teams, but ultimately due to injury couldn't stick. Last season, and he's only able to play in 4 games due to injury. But when he's healthy, he's a very good wide receiver. So I'm very excited to see what this wide receiver core of very talented receivers can do in Birmingham. Moving on, I'm going to talk about players from the Columbus Aviators. Columbus is formerly the Michigan Panthers. They're one of the 3 teams that relocated going into this season. The first few players I want to talk about is their core group of running backs. And the first one I want to talk about is Toa Taua. Last season in the UFL, he had 613 total yards. He led the league in rushing touchdowns. And he's somebody that wasn't even on the Michigan Panthers rosters to start the season. He was in training camp with them last year, didn't make the team, due to injury after a couple games, he was brought back onto the team after being out of football for close to a month after training camp ended, and when he was called back to the Panthers after or at the start of the season. But he had a very tremendous year. He in 2025 went to training camp and went through the preseason with the Cleveland Browns, but didn't make it. He's back in the UFL. Excited to see what he can do. Another running back I want to talk about is John Lovett, another very talented running back who, from the San Antonio Brahmas, who split carries with Anthony McFarland. He only played 3 games last season, unfortunately missed time due to injury. But in 2024, he had 444 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. The guy that's very talented when healthy and given a chance to play. Excited to see how they will be used. If Towell will be more used as more of like their short yardage goal line back, and Lovett is used in other situations. Well, they also have a third very talented running back in Jaquandre White, who in 2025 was 7th in the league in rushing touchdowns and 11th in rushing yards on a struggling Houston Roughnecks offense. He was one of the brighter spots for them. He's another very talented guy. So I'm eager to see how he fits in with those 2 other running backs. I think their running back group will be very exciting this season. Next up, I want to talk about quarterback Jalen McClendon. He was another player. He was on the Houston Roughnecks last season. Didn't start off the year as Houston's starting quarterback. Went in later in the year and at times was really able to provide a spark for their offense and really get them going. He rounded up 3rd in the UFL in passing yards last season and 5th in passing touchdowns. Again, a pretty lackluster offense. So he's a very talented player. I'm excited to see what he can do with some good talent around him in Columbus. The last player I want to talk about for the Aviators is wide receiver Devin Ross. He was 2nd in the league last year in kick return yardage, so he's very dynamic in that aspect. Hopefully they can find ways to use him more as a receiver. He's a very big big playmaker. So I'm excited to see what he can do and what type of big plays he can provide to this Aviators offense in the passing game. Next up, the DC Defenders, who are actually the defending UFL champions. I'm going to start off with their quarterback, Jordan Teamu. He was the passing touchdown leader for the UFL last season. He's another guy that's been around for a bit. He's been with the Defenders since 2023, going back to their full season of XFL football. He also has experience playing in the USFL in 2022 and playing in the 2020 version of the XFL before that got shortened due to COVID. So he's a very experienced quarterback. He's one of the top quarterbacks in the UFL. I'm excited to see what he can build on with his talent and what he can build on with his team around him, and what he can bring with his experience and continue to bring with his experience to this team as they defend their championship. Next up is cornerback DeAndre Baker. He's somebody that, again, he's been with DC for a couple of years. He was a former first-round pick of the New York Giants. So he has some NFL experience, but ultimately couldn't stick around in the NFL. He's in the UFL. He's had a couple of very good seasons the past 2 years, and I'm very excited to see what he brings this season with his experience and what he can add to this Defenders defense. Next up is I'm going to talk about the running backs. First off, I want to talk about running back Deion Jackson, who is a very talented running back. He was 3rd in rushing yards last season and 9th in rushing touchdowns, while splitting time with their other running back, Abram Smith, who had a decent, played decent in his own right, splitting carries. He had 285 rushing yards last year. He's a very talented running back. Last season, he was coming off of a torn ACL that he suffered in the 2024 season that cost him that entire year. But to kind of see the amount of talent that he has in 2023 with the DC Defenders, he led the XFL in rushing yards. So he has, when he's healthy at the top of his game, he has the potential to lead a league in rushing. And him and Deion Jackson can be a very dangerous tandem, a very good tandem for this, what should be a fairly high-powered offense for the DC Defenders. Now, the next two players I want to talk about are their wide receivers. First off is Ty Scott, another player that has suffered some injuries and missed some time because last season he only played in 4 games. However, in 2024, he led the DC Defenders in receiving yards. So, he has the talent when he's healthy. And when paired with the next player I'm going to talk about, Cornell Powell, I think they can be a very dangerous tandem of wide receivers. Powell was the 2025 leader in receiving touchdowns for the UFL. He's a very talented player. He led DC in receiving yards last season. I'm excited to see what these two can do. Hopefully Scott can stay healthy, and what these two can do healthy with Jordan Teamu, one of the top quarterbacks in the league. I'm excited to see what this potentially high-powered offense can look like for the DC Defenders. Moving on, I'm going to talk about the Dallas Renegades. First player I'm going to talk about for them is their quarterback, Luis Perez. He's another guy that has played a lot of spring football. He is, Mr. Spring Football. Been in the UFL. He's been with the Renegades since 2023. Last season, he was the passing yardage leader for the UFL, but he also played in the USFL. I believe he played in the AAF back in 2019. So he has plenty of experience. He's very talented. He is definitely somebody that can be a leader for this Renegades team. Speaking of guys that can be leaders for this Renegade team, linebacker Donald Payne is the next guy I'm going to talk about. The other guy that's been there since 2023 for this team. He's the real leader of their defense. Another guy that has some NFL experience and a good amount of spring football experience. And he's been on this team for 3 years. He's a very good tackler, very good linebacker, somebody that could be a very good vocal leader and help lead this defense. Another defender I want to talk about is cornerback Shaun Wade. Shaun Wade, this is his first season in the UFL, but he's a guy that has some NFL experience. Most notably, he was with the New England Patriots from 2021 to 2023. He started 6 games for them in 2023. So he's somebody that has that level of experience playing at that level of football. So I'm excited to see what he can do in the UFL and see if he's somebody that can try to work his way back onto an NFL roster after this season. Next up is defensive lineman Taco Charlton. He's somebody that was a former first-round pick of the Dallas Cowboys back in 2017. This is actually his 3rd season in the UFL. He spent 2024 with the Birmingham Stallions, and this is his 2nd season with the Renegades. He's a guy that has talent. Obviously, he was a first-round draft pick in the NFL, so he's another guy that is a very veteran player that can be a leader of this defense and is still very talented and still has a lot of gas left in the tank in spring football. Next up, I want to talk about running back Day Hunter. Last season, he was 4th in the league in rushing yards while splitting carries in the backfield. Another guy that was splitting in a running back tandem last year. However, the running back he was splitting carries with is no longer on the team. He's on a different team that I will talk about later. So I'm excited to see what he can do if he can get the bulk of the carries. As there was times he was providing a big spark to this offense that couldn't really get much going in the running game last season. So he's the guy that I'm excited to see, hopefully be able to be a good workhorse back. And the final player I want to talk about for Dallas is wide receiver Tyler Vaughns. He's another guy that has experience. This is his 4th season with the team. Last season was 5th in receiving yards and 4th in receiving touchdowns. So obviously he has some chemistry with Luis Perez. He has shown that he's a very reliable player. He's shown that he has a bunch of talent. So again, just excited to see what he can do going into this season. Next up is I'm going to talk about players from the Houston Gamblers. The Gamblers are a team that were previously the Houston Roughnecks, but they're going back to the USFL name of the Houston Gamblers, the name they had before the merger to the UFL. First off, I want to talk about their quarterbacks. I'm just going to lump both the quarterbacks together of Donovan Smith and Hunter Deckers. Smith is local to the area. He played football at the University of Houston. Deckers, player that's very talented JUCO quarterback that spent some time last offseason with the Kansas City Chiefs in training camp. Right now, not sure which one of them is going to be the starter. That's obviously something that's going to get worked out throughout training camp. But they're both very young players that seem to be talented. I'm excited to see what they can do going into the season. Next up, defensive end Malik Fisher is somebody that again has experience in the UFL. Former DC Defenders player, was near the top of the league in sacks a couple of years ago for the DC Defenders. Last season had a bit of an off year, but he's still a very talented player, and I'm excited to see what he can do for this defense. Next up is running back Nate McCrary. Last season he was 5th in the league in rushing yards. Again, another guy who was splitting carries. He was splitting carries last year with Toa Tawa with the Michigan Panthers. So excited to see what spark he can provide to this offense, as he is a very talented running back, and I'm intrigued to see what he can do as a workhorse. And the final guy I'm going to talk about for Houston is wide receiver Justin Hall. Last season, Justin Hall was 4th in receiving yards and 7th in touchdowns. He is somebody that is a very dynamic wide receiver. He's very talented. He is undersized. He's only about 5'8", but he doesn't play it. He plays at a very high level. He's been with Houston for a few years. In the past, basically 2 years, he has really been the highlight of their team, and he's been the guy that has really stuck out on their offense as being one of their top guys. So I hope he can continue that into this season and be a very big help for whichever young quarterback that they wind up starting. So the next team, the Louisville Kings. They're the relocated Memphis Showboats. First thing I want to talk about for them is quarterback Jason Bean. Jason Bean is interesting and notable to me because he was the #1 pick in the 2024 UFL draft for Memphis. However, he never played a single snap that season. He hasn't played a single snap of UFL football because he is somebody that in 2024 signed as an undrafted free agent with the Colts and wound up being on their practice squad that season. So didn't try to come back to the UFL in 2025. Continues to be on the Colts practice squad, but now he is finally going to come to the UFL. 2 years after being drafted. So I'm excited to see what he can do. Seeing what he was on the Colts in preseason, he seems to be somebody that's very talented. Going back to his days at Kansas, he's somebody that led them to some pretty big wins, and somebody that is exciting. He's fresh young quarterback into this league. So I'm excited to see what he can do. As when they were the Memphis Showboats, they were a team that had a whole lot of quarterback questions. When they were the Memphis Showboats, they had a lot of quarterback questions. Maybe now they've relocated and Jason Bean has come to the team. Maybe now they've finally found their answer at quarterback and he can get them some wins. Next player I want to talk about is linebacker Steele Chambers. Chambers is another guy that he spent last season in the UFL on Memphis. He was 3rd in the league in tackles. He's very good at tackling. He's a very good linebacker. He's, somebody that hopefully can take even a bigger step this year. Maybe start to be a leader of this team. After now they've relocated and they need to find some people that can help steer the ship. I think Steel Chambers is somebody that is a very talented linebacker. I look forward to seeing what he can do. Next up, I want to talk about their two of their running backs. First one that I want to talk about is running back Benny Snell. That name sounds familiar. It's because he has NFL experience. He spent 4 years in the NFL with the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he started 5 games between the 2019 season and 2020 seasons. So his first and second seasons in the NFL. Those are obviously his 2 best years. As he, got some good playing time, got some good reps, and he has hopefully can still have that same talent coming into the UFL after not playing in a couple of years. The other running back I want to talk about is Kalen Ballage. Last season he was 10th in the league in rushing yards, and he split carries with Day Hunter. So he's another guy that maybe he'll be splitting some carries with Benny Snell, or maybe he can show out and show, hey, I'm the workhorse back. I can be the number 1 guy here and really take over that backfield for these Louisville Kings. Now, the last guy I want to talk about is Jonathan Adams. He spent the last 2 seasons with the Memphis Showboats. Last season was 7th in the league in receiving yards. He's, a good target, good big body target for a young quarterback like Jason Bean. I'm interested to see how their chemistry develops and what kind of help he can be as a veteran receiver for a young quarterback in Jason Bean, and how he can really help this team going into the year. Now I'm going to talk about the Orlando Storm. They're the final relocation team. In the UFL, the final of the 3 relocated teams. They are the relocated San Antonio Brahmas. I'm going to start off by talking about their quarterback. They don't have really any quarterbacks that have any UFL experience, but they do have one that has some NFL experience, and that's Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's somebody that was, I believe, a 5th-round pick for the Browns a few years ago, started some games in 2025. So obviously he has some decent NFL experience, although things didn't really work out all that well for him in the NFL. He's now here in the UFL. He appears to be a very talented quarterback. So let's see what he can do in the UFL. Maybe somebody that just needs that second chance and can go out and ball out and have a good year. But time will tell. Next up, I'll talk about linebacker Devontae Beckett. Beckett was 2nd in the UFL in tackles last season. So he's a guy that's a very talented linebacker. Can go out and make some plays. He's new to Orlando. This is a relocated team, but he was on San Antonio before then. So hopefully he's a guy that can come in and try to help be a leader of this defense. Next up is running back Joshua Corbin. He actually led the UFL in rushing yards last season and was 8th in rushing touchdowns last year in the UFL. He's a guy that's a very talented running back. Obviously, when he gets the bulk of the carries, he can lead the league in rushing. I'm intrigued to see how he can help this offense. He can maybe be a safety valve or take some pressure off of Dorian Thompson-Robinson and really help him out there from the running back position. Finally, I'm going to talk about a couple of wide receivers for Orlando. First one I'm going to talk about is KJ Hamler. Again, a guy that doesn't have UFL experience but has NFL experience, as he is a former 2nd-round pick of the Denver Broncos back in 2020. And another guy that really health issues and injury issues is what kept him from getting more time and being a better player in the NFL. But whenever he was on the field, he was a very good playmaker. So interested to see. Hopefully he can come in and stay healthy and again be a big boost to this offense and a young quarterback in Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And the final player I'm going to talk about is wide receiver Chris Rolland. Rolland is a very dynamic playmaker. Last season, he led the UFL in all-purpose yardage. He was 2nd in the league in receiving yards last season. Back in 2024, he actually had the only kick return touchdown in the UFL that entire season. He was formerly on the DC Defenders the past 2 seasons. He was, you know, just this year brought onto the Orlando Storm. I think he's somebody that, with his dynamic playmaking, with his ability to just make plays with when he gets the ball in his hand, I'm excited to see what he can do. He is somebody that, after the 2024 season, I thought was going to get a shot in the NFL. Obviously, that didn't happen. I thought last season, after the UFL switched to have the same kickoff rules as the NFL, and Rowling continued to be a great kick returner, that maybe then he was going to get looks. Still hasn't happened. Maybe this will be the year, but that remains to be seen. I'm just excited to see what he can do in Orlando with this new quarterback and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, with hopefully some good pieces on that offense, and what he can do to really elevate this team in their first season in Orlando. Finally, the final team I'm going to talk about, the eighth and final team of the UFL, the St. Louis Battlehawks. I'm going to start off by talking about their quarterback, Brandon Silvers. They're another team that doesn't really have quarterbacks with much UFL experience. Silvers is the only one that has experience in the UFL in their QB room. He started 3 games for the Battlehawks last season due to a couple of players going down with injuries. He played pretty good. Excited to see what he can do. If he is the presumed starter going into this season and through training camp, and what he can do with this team around him. Especially with the 2 wide receivers that I'm going to talk about. First off, Hakeem Butler, who is a very big body receiver. He's 6'5", close to 230 pounds. Last season, which was a down year for him, he was 5th in receiving touchdowns. And the year before that, he was the UFL Offensive Player of the Year. Last year, he missed a couple games due to injury. So thus the down year, which his down year is he's still a top 5 receiver, at least in receiving touchdowns. And the other wide receiver I want to talk about is Jahcour Pearson. Last season, he led the league in punt return yardage. So obviously, he's another guy that's a very dynamic player when you get the ball in his hands. Back in 2023 in the XFL, he was one of the top receivers. He was on the All XFL team. So he is a guy that does have the talent. Hopefully he can get his receiving numbers up this year, but still excited to see what he can do, as he is such a talented player. And moving on to some of their linebackers. First linebacker I want to talk about is Pita Te'am Openo. He was the 2025 sack leader for the UFL. Obviously very talented. The Battlehawks defense last year was a very good defense, and Pita was a very big part of that, being able to get after the quarterback and really help, get pressures and, get after the quarterback and just be very disruptive. The next player I want to talk about is another linebacker, Jordan Williams, who Pita is the pass rusher. Williams is just the sideline-to-sideline tackler, as he was the 2025 tackle leader for the UFL last year. So he's somebody that really knows how to get downhill, make tackles, make plays, can be in the right place, can, again, really help this defense where needed. So excited to see what he can do going into the season. This is his first year in St. Louis. He was, I believe, on the Brahmas last season. The Brahmas are actually a team that, for the 2 years that they were in the UFL and their 3 years of existence, had a pretty good defense. They, especially 2024, they had a great defense, and a lot of those players are now, spread around the league. And Williams is definitely one of those very good defensive players that has come from San Antonio. Now, the final player that I'm going to talk about is running back Jarvion Howard. Last season, Howard was 9th in the league in rushing and 11th in touchdowns. He is another running back that is looking to get his opportunity as the number one running back and the starter in the workhorse first team. As last season, again, he put up pretty decent numbers as the backup running back for St. Louis, as he was the backup and splitting carries with Jacob Sailors last year, who was the best running back in the UFL, somebody who went on to sign with the Lions and stay on the Lions roster all of last season. So I'm excited to see what Howard can do now that it's just, or mainly just him, and how he can be a workhorse back. He was very talented in a lot of games last year, busting off a lot of big runs, being just a good playmaker when needed. So I'm very excited to see what he can do as a hopefully true number one starting running back this year. Let me know in the comments if there's any notable players to you going into this UFL season, if you're excited for the UFL, if you are just new and stumbling across my video and wondering what the UFL is, let me know in the comments. But just always remember, just because the NFL season is over doesn't mean football ever really ends. As spring football kicks off in a little over a month. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Till next time.